So, welcome to the HR Book Club. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kevin Green, and we're going to be discussing his book, Competitive People Strategy. Welcome, Kevin. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
No worries. Yeah, thank you for joining us. So I think from my side, I'm a recruiter, and I mostly know you as being the former chief executive of the REC. But tell us a bit more about what you're doing now in terms of your career.
Basically, since I gave up the full-time job at the REC, I went plural or portfolio, whichever way you want to describe it. So non-executive director, strategic advisor, working with 7 businesses, all with people behind the strategic mix, many of them backed by fast growth companies, backed by private equity. And I've enjoyed that immensely. I've done the odd consultancy project, which I'll talk about in a moment, and obviously spent the time writing one book and starting to think and plan the second book. So that's what I've been doing the last 3 years. Prior to the REC, I was also HR director at Royal Mail as we went through the major change. So sort of HR director, business person, author, non-exec chair. Quite an eclectic career, shall we say. And also, by the time this goes out, I think it will have been announced, I'm going to go back and do an HR role. I'm going to be a chief people officer for a FTSE 250 company. So I'm looking forward to do that as well. So, I'm a practitioner at heart. I like running and doing things.
Good. Well, very best wishes with the new role. Certainly be excited to see that be announced. So let's go, obviously, and talk about the book. So Competitive People Strategy. So I saw that it was shortlisted in the 2020 Business Book Awards, which is fantastic. And this was recommended by Glenn Jones, who was previous interviewee, on the HR Book Club. So please tell us a bit more about what the book is about and who it's aimed at.
Yeah, the book was aimed at a sort of anybody that's interested in improving organizational performance and doing that in a human-centric or people-centric way. So what I've always felt is there's a lot of people that write about business strategy and a lot of people that write about leadership and write about HR. But I don't think there's very many books that talk about how do you define a people strategy? How do you define a people strategy that makes the organization more successful? So that was the premise of the book. It's, the reason for writing it is I've been a business leader, a chief exec, MD, as well as an HR director. And for me, I used to go into organizations and talk to HR teams about their strategy and plans, and often a huge disconnect between what they are doing and being clear about how it creates impact on organization and business performance. And for me, I think that's the bit, that's the nugget, the bit that organizations struggle with, the bit which is we're clear about how we compete, what our competitive advantage is, how we're going to deliver it, and what talent, capability, culture, mindset do we need to make us successful, and how does the people function help us deliver that. So it was really that book about looking at people strategy and how to do it. It's a practitioner's book. So it's a book for MDs or HR directors or aspiring HR directors or anyone that wants to think, how do I just make sure that what I'm doing is making a difference and adding value?
Yeah, okay, very interesting. So this was your first book, and you slightly highlighted there might be another one, but what were the challenges you faced, obviously, in the sort of writing process?
Well, the fascinating thing was I got commissioned quite quickly. I talked to a couple of publishers. I had a very clear idea about what I wanted to do, and Kogan Page quite early said, "Yeah, we love the sound of that. Let's do it. And here's a contract." And then I thought, right, how do I write a book? And so because I'd not done it before, I'd written essays and written blogs and articles, but never, 65,000 to 80,000 words is a lot of work. So the bit I found fascinating was the first part of the book, which was to do my chapter headings and my overall narrative. Very simple. I did some research with a company called Lace Partners, who are very strong in the HR sort of change field, and they helped me. And we interviewed 30 HR directors about their views on people strategy, which was brilliant. And I started to sort of flesh out each of the chapters. fantastic. Really enjoyed it. It was creative. I had whiteboards and post-its and was doing loads of reading and looking at other people's work and other research, and going to quite deep academic text, but also looking at practitioner stuff. So
Yeah.
a fascinating start of the process. And then, of course, you sort of get into, but actually this chapter needs to be about 6,000 to 7,000 words, and I've written 1,000. So I've got, and then I found that I was starting to having to create some discipline and structure. So what do I want to say in this chapter? What research have I got? What references have I got? First draft, rewrite it, got my wife to read it. She'd make some edits. I'd send it off to a couple of HR friends I know. They'd come back with edits. Then I'd send it to Kogan Page. They'd come back. And so it's a really iterative process. It's a process of coming up with initial ideas, doing the research, trying to get down on paper what you want to say, and then trying to make it as a compelling. I wanted to make it easy to read. I wanted to make it accessible. And I wanted it to be very practical. So I gave recommendations and checklists. I gave lots of diagrams. So for me, it's about, you want people to pick up the book and want to read it, not to pick it up and start reading, oh, well, I'll get to that another day and put it on a shelf, never to be seen again. So I wanted to make it a book that people wanted to read and wanted to finish.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we spoke with Glenn about the book, when he recommended it, and he showed us his copy, and his copy had like notes all on the side and on the top and all these little sort of bits. So he's obviously very much using it in that sort of way.
For me, that's the best thing someone can say. You don't make loads of money out of writing an HR book. It's a passion project. It's something you want to do. It's something you want to say. And for me, it's about young HR practitioners. The thing that they do early in their careers, they do a business partner role, or they do a functional specialist role, and they may go off and do a CIPD and whatever. But this is the bit that I think very few people really give them the educate. How do you do this stuff, the people strategy stuff? So I wanted to make it a book that people would pick up and dip into and keep going back to and use it when they have to do a presentation. And I wanted to make, so when Glenn holds it up and he's got post-its on it and he's used it and referenced it, and I also like the idea of having a debate. The one thing is there's no one way of doing this stuff. What you want is lots of voices, lots of people with a view and an opinion. And if they've done, senior HR roles, they've got lots of experience to bring, because I didn't want to write a book which was theoretical and conceptual. I wanted it to be strong in terms of its structure and process and how you do this, but I also wanted to give stories about the reality of doing this. So there's a big piece in the book about the Royal Mail transformation. There's lots of examples where I've interviewed other people about how they've tried to do this and what worked and what didn't. So that's the point. It's conceptual, it's theoretical, but then how do you do it in reality?
Yeah. So you said that there was another book. So sneak preview then. Tell us what's the plan?
Well, the second book is a sort of and I think I'd see it as a series, but I'd see it as a follow-on. So what it is, it's about competitive HR. So I think what I'm now doing is, this is how you do the strategy stuff. This is how you make sure what you're planning to do as an HR team or function is spot on and is going to add loads of value. This is how you evaluate it. And a lot of this first book was about the business. A lot of it is about how do you use business tools and stuff. The second book is more about the HR function itself. What tools should we be using? So there's a lot in there about design thinking. There's stuff in there about agile. There's stuff in there about how the HR function needs to organize itself. There's stuff in there about how the HR function should develop capability. So the first book's about what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. Second book is how do we sort ourselves out and how to make sure that we're fit for purpose and ready to take on that mantle and deliver value.
Excellent. So new role, new book. Let's talk a little bit about what book would you recommend? We always end with this. So if there's one HR book, and I know that you've got several that you like because we talked off air about that, but if there's one that you would recommend, which book would it be?
I think I'm going to go for this one. It's a book by a guy called Rory Sutherland, who is the Ogilvy's vice chairman. It's not a pure HR book. It's called Alchemy, and it's called The Magic of Original Thinking in a World of Mind-Numbing Conformity. It's about creativity. It's about unleashing human potential within organizations and about innovation and product. It's a fantastic book. And the other thing I would say, it's funny. I laughed out loud, and Rory Sutherland, if you ever get a chance to see him talk, is worth it. I'm a great believer. He's got, he talks about things like beware of averages and what gets mismeasured gets mismanaged. And, there's real insight in here. It's a fantastic book and a really different book. And I think it got me to think about lots of things that I'd experienced in organizations and where I'd seen great teams delivering, really high value work. Why was that? And a lot of it was around collaboration and creativity. And so I just found it completely refreshing, very original, and really just well worth a read,
Yeah. Excellent. I'm glad you managed to narrow it down to one, because I know there was a few. But thank you very much for joining us, and it's really interesting to hear about some of the future plans that you have, but also obviously about Competitive People Strategy, the book. And thank you again, and I'm sure we'll see you at some point in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you for inviting me. I do appreciate it. Cheers.